Okay. How do you tell? Well, you just like if you exit like, I mean, if you click view.
Oh, participants.
Yeah.
Switch to that.
So I think we're still gonna do this, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good.
We actually now have one in the.
Do we have
Zoom.
one?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good.
I don't know if they can actually say stuff or not, but maybe we just ask her to write in the chat a little bit her who she is.
Yeah, it might be that. Yeah.
Oh, now she left though.
Huh?
Now she left.
Oh, okay.
I'll keep a look at it.
Okay. Okay, it's 9. I think we should start. So thank you for being here. 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. So my name is Helene and Andreasen, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Linguistics Data Interest Group. I come from UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, so I'm situated like way up in the north in Tromsø. My background is in French linguistics. I have a PhD in French linguistics from UiT, and I currently work as a research librarian at the same university, where I'm head of teaching in the library, and I'm also co-managing an international disciplinary specific repository for open data. And I'm also very much involved in training, RDM training, both at the local and also national level. Lindsay?
Yeah. Good morning. My name's Lindsay Ferrara, and I also happen to live in Norway. I'm at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim, so a little bit below Helene. But I'm a professor at the university, and I work in sign language linguistics, so I work a lot with corpus linguistics. And so I joined the RDA not so long ago, and then became co-chair of the Linguistics Data Interest Group maybe 2 years, 1 or 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah.
So this is my first RDA plenary, and so we're here today to talk a little bit about the work we're doing in linguistics with research data management.
Yeah. So the outline of the session is that first we're gonna give an introduction to the interest group and the work we are currently doing, and then we are hoping to have a nice open discussion about a survey that we are currently developing. You will have the opportunity of actually doing the survey here in the room before we close the session with a summary and thinking a bit about what we're going to do next. But I think that since we're not that many people, it would be nice to do a little presentation round, since we're going to be here together in the room for the next 90 minutes. So who you are, where you come from, and why you're here. So if we could start with you.
But maybe we need...
Oh, perhaps we need a microphone? Yeah. So...
Good morning. Yes, I'm Carl Benedict from the University of New Mexico in the U.S., and I'm here primarily to get an understanding of sort of what's happening in this space, as I've recently been engaged in a collaborative research project with a linguist in developing a database and analytic platform around the data that he has been compiling for now decades, and trying to see what the best ways we could look at for being able to transition them from openly available to a more open access model. And I also direct our research data services and IT program for our library. So that's how I come into the RDA context.
Good morning. My name is Daniela Santos Oliveira. I'm currently a program manager for the World Data System. I am originally from Portugal, based in Knoxville, US right now, state of Tennessee. My background is in second language acquisition, although what I'm doing now has nothing to do with it. But my research interest, I have a PhD in second language acquisition, and I'm very interested in linguistics, so I was just trying to see what's happening here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Francesca Frontini. 50% of my time I am a researcher at the Institute for Computational Linguistics in Pisa, Italy. But I'm here with the other 50% of my work life. That is to say, I am here on behalf of Clarineric, which is the research infrastructure, European research infrastructure for language resources and technologies. And we know and follow and collaborate with the work done by this group.
Lauriane Locatelli. I have a PhD in onomastics. Ich arbeite in Frankreich bei CNRS in OPIDOR Team, das französische Tool für Data Management Plan erstellt.
Hello, my name's Levo Murray. I'm the Director of Strategy for the Indigenous Data Network in the University of Melbourne. I manage a project, a national infrastructure project, so managing the humanities, arts, social sciences and Indigenous research data commons in Australia. A lot of that work intersects with Paradisic, for those who might be familiar with that work, also with the language resource data commons in Australia. So got a particular research interest in linguistics, also medical anthropology, and so I just want to come along and join the session.
Thank you. We don't at the moment have, I don't think anybody's on the online.
Okay.
So we can move on.
Yeah. So the Linguistics Data Interest Group was created founded in 2017. And when creating the interest group, of course, we had some goals in mind. And one of the things that we started with was developing a set of principles for data citation in linguistics, because we had seen previously that there was a very low percentage of linguistics papers that actually cited their data. I think it's not unique for linguistics, but that was something that we observed. So we wanted to, start working with that. So we created the Austin Principles for Citational Linguistics data. And then we continued a few years later with a set of very concrete guidelines, the Tromsø recommendations for citational linguistic data, where we try to provide examples for as many data types as possible that we do observe in linguistics. And yeah, so this we finished, I think, right before the pandemics, and we are now currently, so it didn't, not very much happened during the pandemics, but now we have started working on on getting information out about the recommendations that we created in some years ago, trying to reach out to journal editors to inform them about the guidelines, and hopefully that they will include them in their author guidelines, or at least give us some feedback on whether the guidelines are good or not. But then we had in our charter, when we created the LDIG group, that we wanted to focus on outreach and education, because we see that there's a lot of goodwill out there, and people are for open science, but for some reason, people don't include the open science practices into their own work. So what we have started focusing on now more than before is education and outreach efforts, and so that we can get in touch in one way or another with linguists from different subdisciplines to help them get started, to see what they need, so that we all together can work on establishing these good routines that we know are needed. And last year we actually we had kind of a kickstart on this work, because we applied for and we got money from the RDA EOSC Future Domain Ambassador Program. So we got some money to work on outreach efforts, so the goal of this program is a two-way thing. It's not only about RDA and EOS getting information about what the community needs, but also informing the community, so in this case linguists, about this international organizations such as RDA and EOSC. So within this project, we started working on a survey that we are going to send out worldwide to linguists. And the goal of this project, in the end, is to create or inform linguists about educational material that they can use to in order to work with the research data, so to properly preserve them and properly share them if they can. So the goal of the survey that we are working on is both for us to get started this work on educational resources, but also to provide data for other people who are developing support services for their linguists. So we have developed a survey where we are interested in knowing about their knowledge when it comes to open science and data in particular. Also about their practices, not that much on attitudes. We are more focusing on the knowledge and practice part. And we are seeking to get information from linguists from all subdisciplines, because we know that practices and data types are different from one subdiscipline to another. And we also want to reach out and get information from researchers on all levels, so from the PhD student to the senior professor. And also, hopefully, to get information from researchers on with more or less knowledge about research data management. So this is the task. So we started, so what we have done so far is that this spring we developed a first version of the survey, and we piloted it among three universities in Europe. And then we got feedback and we revised the survey, and then we sent it out and piloted it among the members of our interest group, so just before this plenary. And goal now is to do a final revision of the survey and create a well-thought plan for launching the survey, and then we hope to launch the survey globally in the beginning of next year. Yeah?
Do you want to shall we swap?
Yeah, I can go over here.
Yeah, so we're gonna. So we started designing the survey. We wanted a mix of both controlled responses, and that's just because they're easy to keep track of, but then also have some more open responses so that we can get a little bit more context when it was needed. we wanted to see, so there's been some work showing that uptake of open science practices is a bit slow across linguistic subdisciplines. So we wanted to assess if linguists know about these concepts in the first place, and then how they're actually working with their data to try and kind of pinpoint where some trouble areas are so that we can design interventions, educational resources, etc. We didn't start from scratch. There's been quite a number of surveys recently across different types of communities. So we drew from 2 previous surveys. One was conducted by Elsevier and the Center for Science and Technology at Leiden University, this Bergmans et al. And they were just doing researchers in general. It was across all disciplines, if I remember correctly. They surveyed 1,200 researchers about open science practices and research data. And then we also drew questions from a Springer Nature survey, and that was specifically targeting like earth sciences, medical sciences, and physical sciences. So we were looking at the questions that these surveys were asking and kind of tried to adapt them to the linguistics context, because we find that often the focus on the earth sciences, for example, it's kind of abstract for linguists because we work with such different types of data generally. So, let's see. So yeah, so we thought we would just show you a bit about the survey and also the 2 rounds of feedback that we've been getting, just to kind of contextualize a bit more the actual survey. We had 7 sections to the survey, or we have 7 sections. The first one assesses general knowledge about open science, and again, yeah, just how familiar the linguists are with basic tenets. There's only 6 questions in this section. You know, have you heard about open science as a general concept? Because we are sometimes working at that level. And then what aspects of open science do you practice? And we give different kinds of examples. So I just plucked out one question so you can kind of see. So we do see that, you know, people have heard about open science generally. Most linguists that responded are most familiar with open access publishing and then open access or open research data. So those are 2 tenets that most people seem to be quite aware of. We also had quite positive responses with open code. So we see, and of course, the people we sent the survey out are 2 LDIG members, so we expect that they are a bit familiar with open science practices. We're not sure what it will look like when we launch more globally. Yeah. So then the next section is more about support and resources that are available if someone wants to practice open science. This section also had 6 questions, some examples here. If you had a question about something related to open science, do you know where to go? Even if it's at your university or somewhere out to a colleague. And then does your university, for example, have an official policy on research data management? Just to see kind of the level of awareness. So again, just kind of picked one question that we had. This is kind of what kind of support is available at your university. So we have things like, does your university have dedicated personnel? Do you have judicial support? So many types of linguistics data is actually, you know, video recordings of people. So there's a lot of legal issues that come into play there that can get kind of tricky. We have things like, do you have archiving platforms that you can use at your university? Do you have financing for open publishing? These kinds of things. Ethical support, like IRB support. We see here actually that, this first pilot with the 3 universities, there's a lot of people who don't know. So they don't actually know what kind of support there's already available at their university, which we thought was quite interesting. Less for the LDIG group, but again, we would expect that they're a little bit more aware of the different things. I'm just looking here too, it looks like a lot of universities actually do have financing for the APCs, which is nice to see. A bit less with judicial support, but yeah. So again, mapping out, it's not only about knowing about open science, so I know that I should publish articles as open as possible, but if I don't have the $2,000 APC, it doesn't really matter, right? So just looking at trying to kind of tease apart, we can't intervene in a university paying or not for an APC, but if they don't even know that they can, reposit their data, on some platform, that's something we can intervene in. Yeah. So then so this is still in section 2. This was just some of the things. So we realize that some of our questions, we need to make sure that we actually understand every answer that we give them, the alternatives. We noticed that depending on regions, for example, they were reading words a little bit differently. So some of the respondents gave feedback that it was confusing. So like ethical support, I think someone was like, is that IRB? So things like that. So we were trying to kind of clarify this in the later versions of the survey. Yeah, and just making sure we're capturing as wide a scope as possible, not just the positive incentives, but also if there's any top-down, motivations that they're having. Yeah, we took care of that the last slide. Okay. So then in the next section, we're looking at views towards research data management. This has a bit, 7 questions, and it's a lot of agree, disagree kind of questions about sharing research data. If people think that having access to data is important in the first place. And then again, going back to some of the main activities of the LDIG, asking them about citation practices, etc. Yeah, so that's okay. Let me see if there was any particular notes on that one. Yeah, we got some feedback that maybe in here we could add a little bit more about motivations about why or why not they make their own data openly available, to see is it actually like legal issues that they're afraid they're going to break the law, for example, or if they view their data as their own and they don't really want to share. So trying to kind of tease apart what kind of attitudes or motivations people are bringing. So again, thinking about interventions later on. Yeah, and then in our 4th section, we're looking at practices. So we're asking people to think about a recent project that they conducted, and then talking about what they did in that project. We're asking them about the types of data that they're using, because again, this affects a lot how open it can be. And then very kind of technical questions about, how much data are they working with? Are we talking about 10 megabytes or are we talking 5 terabytes? Because this also makes it different for archiving. And then like for my own experience, because I work with video recordings, I have lots of videos. We have like 300 videos in our corpus. That made it a little bit challenging to find a repository that was willing to work with that file type, but then also all the ethics and legalities that go into that. And then asking them how they publish their data. So what was really fun is that we actually see linguists using lots and lots of types of data. So here we have things from text data, audio, video recordings, but then even things like eye tracking data. We do know linguists use EEGs, but none of the respondents so far have worked with that. But then, experimental data, we have transcriptions, annotations, metadata, lexical data and databases, computational data, interviews. So lots of different types that will all have kind of different regulations around how easy it is to make it shareable, and also how easy it is to store, for example. Yeah, and then also kind of what formats people are working with. So we have audio types of files like MP3s. We also have MPEGs and MP4s, but then even just simple text files to image files, tabular data, programming in R and Python, linguists use more and more, and etc. So again, just getting kind of a landscape with what kind of data that linguists are working with. Will help us when we're designing interventions about how to help them share these different types of data. Yep. And now I think I'm turning it back to you, Helena, to just finish off the last few questions.
So the fifth section of the survey is about training. We know that a lot of institutions have courses on different aspects of research data management. We also know that in many institutions, courses are integrated into the PhD or master's programs. So we wanted to know about whether they had any formal training or not. And formal training, we see it quite broadly, so it can include all courses, workshops, online learning modules, seminars. It can be quite varied. And we had 7 questions in that section. First of all, had they had any training, and if not, would they like to have training, etc. And for those who had training, we wanted them to evaluate whether the training had been useful, and also who provided the training, because that as well differ across institutions. And we can see, so this is from the 2 different pilot rounds, we do see that quite a few get their training from fellow researchers or the administration. We also see that the library personnel is quite, well, it's not a big surprise, but library personnel also in some cases do provide the training. And it varies from one institution to another, whether it is the library or the research administration who has the responsibility at the institution to work with research data management services more centrally. What we have been talking about, and this is something that we have seen in reports about related issues in Norway, is that we should include something on informal training, because it might be that people haven't attended courses. We know that some people said, no, I haven't attended any courses, and I'm not interested in doing so either, because I have been speaking with colleagues and I think that I have enough information about research data management, so I don't need to take a course. So we have been discussing how we can include a question about that. So this is something we need to think about. Then in the next section, we are asking about their knowledge when it comes to infrastructures and initiatives. And for instance, we want to know about their knowledge and whether they have used any of these services. So one example, for instance, is whether they know whether the institution at home offers a repository where you can archive your research data. And we also ask whether they know about repositories within their discipline. And we also ask about their knowledge when it comes to more international initiatives, such as the RDA, EOSC. We are asking about their knowledge about the DORA declaration, the COARA, and also about the CC licenses. So all these things that exist out there that are of relevance and of use to the linguistic community. So we have quite a few questions about that. And so if we look at the answers from our question about whether they know about any linguistic data archives, we just asked them to list what they knew about. And that provided a very nice list of repositories. So that gives us an idea about what do they know about. Because a lot of people, they might know that the institution does have a repository, but it might not fit with their data. The thing is that in that case, they should know about a disciplinary specific repository that they could use instead. So this is about knowing about what people know about. And then we had a final section that was focusing on background demographics, because we do want to know a bit more about the different profiles that are answering the survey. So we are asking about their age, we're asking about which subdiscipline they're working within, we are asking about which country they come from, and which career stage they are considering themselves being on, and also what their main role is within the organization. So whether they are working more with research than with teaching, many do both equally. So to get an idea about who are the different people who are responding, and try to see some patterns in the answers from the different groups of people. Do you want to continue? Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got an introduction to the survey now, but now we actually are gonna work a bit more with it. We actually are gonna ask you to do the survey because we really want feedback on how readable it is, how we're wording questions, if it's confusing, these kinds of things. Because again, we're really going to be attempting to reach linguists across all areas of the globe, and yeah, so we were trying to make our language, as linguists we should be able to do this, but to make our language as clear as possible and accessible as possible. So if you'll indulge us, I've put the QR code to it as well. The link is also in the collaborative notes if that's an easier way to do it, or just the website for the survey. We know that you're not all linguists, so some of the questions you can kind of, you'll probably have to answer them, but you can just make up some responses. But we're curious to, any feedback that you have, you can write it in the collaborative notes or just jot it down that we can discuss in a few minutes. I've also actually printed out the survey for people if they're just very averse to doing it on their phone or their computer. You're happy to have a look of it on the paper.
Yeah. And it should take no longer than 15 minutes approximately.
Yeah, we
so
hope
people
so.
have been using between 13 and 17 minutes when doing it. So, so we will give you time to do the survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
looks like some people are finished. You're more than welcome to pop out and grab a coffee or something. We can start in a few minutes. Okay.
don't understand.
I don't know what that is. I finished. Only a couple vacancies here. Take it out. You use your own computer or you want to use Should we get started?
Yeah, we can.
We think many people have finished, mostly because we can track a little bit on the website. But yeah, if you're still finishing up, that's okay. But yeah, we wanted to ask you your feedback if you have anything concrete, or if you think that we're kind of missing a whole type of question, or anything. Maybe from your own work, like if you're working in a slightly different field, if some issues are relevant for you that might also be relevant for us, that would be also very nice to hear about. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, just if you can use the microphone. Yeah.
Maybe it's a bit my also professional point of view, but of course now in our field more and more people are using also language models, and I see that you put something like computational data, but maybe it could be made more explicit. And then there was another minor thing from the really practical point of view. I did it from my phone, so I'm not sure maybe if it's possible or not. You only allow for, when you ask for the country, to enter one. And so nowadays more and more people in Europe, sometimes they even work cross-country. So it might be useful to allow for, affiliations double affiliations that are across country borders.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also, I feel like you said maybe you're from Australia. I know we don't have Australia on the list. We had gotten that feedback the last time when we were doing the copying and pasting, it got a bit mixed up. So I apologize for that. But that's a good point. Thank you very much. We'll definitely see how we can do that.
Hi. Maybe it would be cool to have more options to take notes or to make some additional notes in the form, because there are some questions. For example, do you know who to contact at your university for open science questions? And I thought, yes, but that's me, so I know, yeah. But I don't know how many people else know. So that's maybe a bias in this. In
like
my
more
answers
comment
now.
boxes, do you
Yeah,
mean?
more comment boxes.
We actually have gone back and forth between having a comment box on every question and people saying it was distracting to having none. So maybe we need to swing a little bit back and have a few more strategically placed. Thank you.
I think I had also a little bit the same feeling. It's odd when you answer this type of questionnaires and you are actually the person that people go to for that type of data. Or like you ask for institutional repository, but in your institution, you are the repository, something like that. So it could be also possible that maybe you could ask a question at the beginning. I don't know how to formulate it, but that you can also it could allow you to trim these questions, because when people answer these questionnaires, there could be people that are really in the position of the normal linguist and people that are very much into these issues, and it could be interesting to be able to separate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so again, we're kind of focusing on the run-of-the-mill linguist, the one who's kind of on the ground. But it might be nice to make sure that that's who we're getting, actually, in the end. Yeah. You're writing that down. Good. Yes.
So, I guess maybe I'll work my way backwards from what occurred to me most recently. In reference to the repository availability, it may be worth distinguishing between what might be a general institutional repository, which are often focused more on documents and media and not data, and the availability of a more data-focused repository. As we have both, and we've definitely, since we have recently had access to a data repository, direct our researchers to that instead of our institutional repository that is more for, institutional records and those other things.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Good
Another one, and this is certainly probably grounded in my bias towards working with geospatial data, that could be a useful additional data category to add to the list, as it cross-cuts a lot of research activities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I'm trying to remember the third one. I may have to come back to it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, thank you for those comments. We'll definitely add that category, I think. More things. How about generally, did you feel like it was too long? Was it actually easy to do on your phone? I never even thought that people might do this survey on their telephones, so that was fun to see all of you pull out the phone. Was it fairly okay to work on the phone? Okay, that's good to know.
Probably one thing I would suggest is maybe fewer pages. More
Yeah,
questions
on one
per
page.
Oh, okay.
That's something we can
That is
definitely
also
think.
something we have been changing.
Yeah.
There's a sweet spot, and I'm not sure where it is, but it seemed there was a lot of aging.
But that might also be a difference between the phone and if you were doing it on the computer. Yeah, okay, that's great feedback, actually. We should also try the survey on our phones as well, so we can
go back
experience
to
it
more questions per
on
per
page. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great
okay.
suggestion, actually. I didn't think about it.
There's a question question over there.
Yeah, hi, Levi from University of Melbourne. One of the things that kind of become like a little bit obvious to me when I was like going through the survey itself is trying to work out that audience of, you know, who exactly you are surveying. When I was answering the questions, it certainly feels as though it's like aimed more towards, you know, your general run-of-the-mill linguist, but also very much early career researchers in that sense. Because I was looking at some of those questions, and it's something when we talk about education and capacity building, that's very much that quintessential kind of questioning and that line of questioning that you're wanting to, you know, have with very early career researchers around how does they structure, you know, having a foundation in what is open science and certainly what is the best practice for that, which kind of leads me directly to the point around FAIR principles, and, you know, particularly, well, I think there should be a question there around open sciences, you know, instrumentally looking at interoperability and the reuse. And then for that being said, then the CARE principles, and specifically looking at Indigenous languages coming from Australia, I know that that is the most complex part of what we do. And both Iris and Paradisic are trying to progress that work.
Okay.
But the research data management, when we look at, you know, orphan and legacy assets and like historical data, it's incredibly complicated then to, you know, transpose that to reuse and future enrich, you know, new research and new study. So I think that's a completely pertinent like question or something you might need to factor into the survey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that feedback. Yeah, I actually was thinking about we should add something about especially the CARE principles when I was at the seminar the other day. Yeah, thank you for that perspective where we don't work, we didn't have anybody in our group working with this, so it was definitely a big oversight. So we definitely will be adding some questions related to that. And we often talk about early career researchers as well, because we think, you know, they're the ones who will be going on and doing this work. But we're noticing, at least with my own conversations with early career researchers, the senior professors are kind of a hindrance in some ways, because I was talking to a postdoc, for example, and it's her supervisor who actually did all the ethical approval and did all the data management in the beginning before she even had arrived. So they're already inheriting practice. And so we also I think we need to make sure that we're also addressing the senior researchers, because in a lot of ways they're the gatekeepers. Just some of these practices in the same way with PhD researchers, if the supervisor is not on board and if they don't think that this is important, they're not going to be helping them figure it out. They're not going to be, you know, teaching them these kinds of and discussing with them the dilemmas and all of that. So yeah, we do actually see a need that we do really want to hear from all of these different levels, because they kind of are interacting quite a lot.
That being said, and I guess, you know, one of the other points of feedback that just came back before, from the outset of your survey, it might be good to kind of categorise by some brief statements that actually does that sublining of that. So, you know, identify, you know, which of the following statements identifies with X, Y, Z, you know, early to mid-career researcher, blah, blah, blah. But then have, you know, linking conventions to particular questions as far as relevance, and
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thinking about the different career stages and when or how folks get training, it may be worth distinguishing between coursework, which would be more likely, but still very much emergent for early career researchers, folks just coming out of, say, their graduate programs, versus mid or later career researchers who, if they've had any at all, it's likely been more of a workshop sort of context and not a coursework context. So being able to distinguish between those may be useful. And the other item that caught my eye was There's the question about a focus on open science, open research. But one of the tensions we've been seeing quite a bit of is that sometimes the disconnect between the focus and support for, whether that's, you know, at a national level in terms of sponsors saying, you know, thou shalt share, but not necessarily providing support, especially to repositories, or providing additional funding within the constraints of budgets so that it ends up eating into the things that the researchers place a high value on. So it ends up being seen as an onerous demand on them. So possibly distinguishing between a focus or demand for supporting open research, but then whether it's actually supported or not.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well, I think. And we see also that is varies a lot across countries as well. It's a bit unfortunate we both live and work in Norway, because we also have found that Norway actually has a ridiculous amount of support. Structurally, actually, we get a lot of support if we want to engage in different practices. And we're also at the moment trying to find additional co-chairs with a little bit different professional and geographic background, for sure, to help us kind of think about all of these issues. But I do agree, kind of separating that out a little bit is a really great idea.
I cannot remember whether there was a precise question. Maybe I'd have to go back to the list. But going back to what was just said, a question such as I would be willing to share my data more openly, but ask people whether they agree or disagree with statements along these lines. I would like to do more, but I cannot due to limitations of budget or other types of limitation. Maybe asking this explicitly, because I think in many countries, indeed, including my own in Italy, although we have basically we set up a repository, we adhere to Claren, but there was for the first 5 years, this was just done in kind. There was absolutely no funding, and now in Italy, the open science roadmap has been adopted in many institutions. So linguists have come to us, all the associations. When I finished the questionnaire, I answered an email because the responsibles for all the associations of linguistics, applied linguistics, computational linguistics, speech in Italy have come to us to ask us about deposit. And luckily, we just got now funding to support all of this, but until now, this wasn't the case.
Interesting.
So all of a sudden, we went from zero to heroes, so to say, just because the approach and the perception to these topics changed, because there was an injunction to deposit, and people, I would say, they prefer to deposit in disciplinary repositories rather than institutions. This is also something to be a little bit
that might also be interesting to explore a bit.
And but it was all of a sudden, and just because certain things change. So training, advocacy. This has been said in many sessions. Only brings you just as
so far. Thank you.
Just touching on that as well, that was kind of triggered a thought. One of the things that we do see a lot of at the institution in which I work is, again, focusing back on, early career researchers, having a kind of, a visceral understanding of what research data management is, not just in the current time, but also it's about that future preservation perspective of research data management. And that's something I can speak very clearly on, that there's a significant gap there in that space of actually, we need to be asking early career researchers, like, what is it that you know about research data management? What's your confidence level around that? So.
Yeah, that's a nice expression actually to use it. How confident are you? That's a nice way of formulating it actually. that might be nice to ask about. I think also what you both touched on is that a lot of the, well, let's say financial or technical issues as well. One is they're changing very fast. So I already remember in my own history, in my youth, I was working in Australia. I did my PhD in Australia, and we were working with the Auslan corpus, so the Australian Sign Language corpus. And I was talking to the manager of that corpus even just a few years ago, and they had a huge problem because he had archived the corpus in ELDP in London as .mov movie files. And then I went to download the corpus to reuse in a different project. None of them worked. And then ELDP was like, oh, yeah, okay. So then he had to go back to the raw data, which he luckily still had from, 1998, and had to recompress into MP4s. And so these things also, I think for, myself, when I was an early career researcher, I would never have thought about this. And these kinds of things are also kind of have to be involved in the discussion. But then also the whims of a government, whether or not they will fund, Clarin or not, and these things. So these are also issues for people to consider when they're choosing repositories, in the sense of, do I think this is a long-term repository or not, and things like that. So these are great points that you both have brought up. I hope Helena is furiously writing everything down. Lovely.
And that relates to a thought that was triggered in the 0 to hero comment, in terms of, we see in a lot of the researchers that we work with, the primary value that they see in placing their data in a repository right now remains a compliance objective, not a professional, peer-to-peer professional obligation or benefit. And it might be interesting to be able to maybe tease that apart a little bit, in terms of what value the respondents see in placing their data into a repository. Is it long-term preservation? Is it checking the box and getting a DOI regardless of the quality and persistence? Is it, the future value and reuse? Because those are very different things, and we're certainly seeing a lot of researchers who their primary value and incentive is getting the DOI that they can put in their report, and that's about it.
Yeah, interesting comment there.
Yeah, I think that's very important that we actually understand why they have proceeded, for instance, to archiving data. Of course, it might be something that has changed over time, but it has been like that the first time they do it because it has been asked for by the journal, but that perhaps, hopefully, during that experience, that they actually see, well, of course, this is perhaps not as difficult as I thought it would be, and I do actually see the value of actually sharing my data set with my peer reviewer, etc., and that they do see the value at some point later. So it
could be along a continuum through their experience.
And we also have, or we expect to see actually quite different practices across subdisciplines, because linguists work with a lot of different types of data. So again, in corpus linguistics, most people are already reusing published corpora, so they're already involved in this process, and they see it. And for myself as well, who make corpora, I know that all the work that goes into archiving that will be used for 200 years in the future, because that's the whole point of having a language corpora. But we do understand that people who are doing, kind of a little project just to get a publication, they might not see the value of archiving that for the future. And then, like psycholinguistics, who has a lot of influence from psychology, they are maybe more aware of, publishing data that can be reused, whereas other subdisciplines, they still haven't actually seen the value. So again, going back to your comment about, well, my funder told me I had to do it, versus in my subfield, we think it's important, trying to maybe tease that apart a little bit. So, and I think for us, we're contrasting linguistics with, physical sciences or something, but also maybe we need to pay attention to creating materials or interventions that might also be subdiscipline specific. Because I think there was a couple like surveys about open science practices in linguistics already. There were at least 2. And what they found was, again, the corpus linguists, they were all on board, right? They didn't really need any convincing, whereas then other fields, there's literally zero uptake kind of thing. Yeah. So that will be, I think, important to try and, tease out a bit. Yeah.
More recent, in my previous position, there was kind of an intersection between linguistics and psychology, and they were exploring language development with children. And one of the big concerns in those groups is, how do you share that? Because even to get parents to consent to share that type of data is really hard. So maybe have a little bit more, and I hope that this survey also in turn will have some of those effects, is trying to have some more awareness of how you can go around these issues and make researchers actually be more on board with sharing that type of information, and also creating some awareness in the community, because sometimes it's not just an issue of the researcher, is the way they are collecting the data, and in linguistics, getting the participant to agree to share that data, right? So here is not just, you have a few more steps into getting that.
Absolutely. I think absolutely about linguists working with children or other disadvantaged communities. I myself work with deaf communities, which comes into a lot of discussions a lot of the time. And we've been talking about it in many of those fields, especially who are working with personal data. It's still easier to just not do it. It's easier just not to even bother trying to make it open, because it's a lot of work and this and that. We also find that it's very different how different countries deal with these issues legally. So in Norway, it's these things that you have to do, and it's relatively straightforward. Whereas I remember Australia, for example, there was a lot more ethical discussion, and it was actually really difficult to get permission, even though we were dealing with unsensitive data, but it was still because we were filming people, whereas the US has different issues. So that also, I think, needs to be thought about at least. It's not maybe that researchers don't want to. One, they might not be able to, which that is a whole different ball game. But we, for example, are still encouraging researchers to manage their data. So even if they can't publish it, there should be metadata about it, and they can still cite that it's an unpublished data set. And so if you can't, put your data on YouTube, what can you do that still can kind of move us in the right direction? But I absolutely agree. The ethics of it is still very important, and there are linguists working in domains that their data shouldn't be just shared around, of course.
Yeah, we did work with groups where one way to go around it is we would say we are not publishing the video data that we collect, or even audio data that we collect, but we are sharing the output of that, the measurements that you get from that, right? And that's a little bit easier. But even so, even just that, sometimes we get questions, right? So I don't know exactly how to go about it, because this just came to me, but maybe it would be worth to have something like that in the survey, because sometimes it may not be that the pushback may not come from the researcher itself, but from these difficulties that they find if they want to share the data, right?
I mean, I was talking with one postdoc in Norway, actually, this particular incident, and she was telling me that to get the approval that she needed for her project, it took 1.5 years, and her postdoc is 3 years long. So these things we also have to be very aware. I, who have a permanent job in a university, I might be able to use 1.5 years to get permission for something that I think is very important. But for people on short-term contracts or non-permanent staff, these things become actually also very practical in the sense of that they can't wait this long to do their project. And that, I think, goes back to that intersection with supervisors, because they're the ones who can do that prep work ready for the start of these different types of projects. And so it also goes back to that, it's easier not to do it, But we still want to shift that people will still think about it, like think carefully before they make that decision. And like you said, okay, it's very rare nowadays that you're only working with one type of data. So is there other parts of your process that you can make more transparent while still respecting the people that you work with? Yeah, very good advice. Anything else? Oh,
did you have a question? Or a comment?
No, I might hold it because I don't want to chew up everyone else's time, and so I might just have
but
that
please
conversation.
come to us afterwards. I would love to hear it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Helena, we have 10 more minutes, so maybe actually you want to do the last few
I
slides. Thank you so much for this feedback. This was actually really great to be able. I know people writing feedback in the survey probably, you know, writing in a little box, we're getting more typos and things like that than these kind of big ticket items.
Yeah, so if you have any further comments or questions about the survey, you know who we are, and if you're interested also in participating in the preparations for the launch of the survey, you know who we are, so you can just contact us. We are planning on creating a little working group that will work on preparing the launch and actually running the whole thing. So please get in touch with us if you are interested. So just to summarize a bit quickly, we have seen, so we had these 2 pilot rounds, and we do see that there are a few differences between when we were asking people in the 3 different universities, whereas when we were asking the RDA community, and that was of course not a surprise. But we see that the results that we got from both rounds, we do think that the plan that we have on creating or informing about available educational material, that can actually help the researchers with some of the challenges that they have. So we do think that the survey will give us good information that we can use in the project. So what we are planning, so now we are going to revise the survey based on the feedback from the second pilot round and also from this meeting. And then, as I said, we are going to establish a working group that will, plan the launch and then carry out the survey, all the different steps of that work. And we do, as it's written here, we are hoping, we are in the end going to publish the findings. We are going to, of course, publish also the data that we get from this survey, so that people who are interested in using the data for developing their own support services, that they will have the data available to do, to support their process. And it will be very important to think thoroughly about how we are getting the survey out, because we do see that it's important to go beyond open science friendly networks so that we get the full breadth of linguists. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we reach different subdisciplines? How do we reach the different levels? How do we reach people who aren't that interested in research data management and who don't care about open science at this point? How do we get them to actually spend 15 minutes answering the survey? Because we are interested in getting in touch with everyone. So that is one question that we have to work on very carefully. We also need to think about when to send the survey out, because we know from our own experience that sending out a survey close to Christmas in Norway, that doesn't work, because no one is working in Norway in December, neither in June. So we need to also to discuss and think about that. So when do we send out the survey to people in different regions? And this is something that we will need help with, because we both live in Norway, and So we need to also discuss that very carefully so that we make it as possible as possible that people actually answer. Yeah, so I think that was it. I don't.
If any of you have access to networks or ways of getting in touch with a linguist, I would please come up to us afterwards. We would really love any type of ideas or people who you know or yourself who might help us kind of distribute this. I think so far we've been doing it a lot through actually contacting specific linguistics departments at universities and asking them to send it to their staff. We might continue doing that, but then, you know, mailing lists and different networks that might be able to reach different types of linguists. Any tips about that would be much appreciated.
It's more on open science practices and the humanities and cultural heritage, so it's a bit broader, but the Italian branch of Clarin is also involved, and the colleague whom I told you is following your activities is actually the person who also kind of mostly contributed to this, to the Clarin part of this questionnaire. So in a way, good news and bad news, in the sense that unfortunately, I think it might, it's also been piloted and it might come up around the same time. But it might be that we have a well-oiled channel in Italy, because we will basically use as a vector the associations, the scientific societies for. And I think this, for us at least, looked like the viable option. And maybe another one, which is kind of related, could be also via journals, because journals more and more also have to approach the question of data publication, and so they might know of my 2 cents.
We've had some recent non-encounters with journals. It's very difficult to get responses from journals and journal editors, but via the association, that's a really good. I'm writing that down actually. Thank you.
And I think that association's contact point could be useful also, possibly at targeting meetings when you have the groups in place. And this suggests it might need to be a longer period over which the survey is administered, but being able to catch the linguists in their natural habitat and at a time when they might be more responsive, because I know it's incredibly challenging to get people to respond to email requests to complete surveys. Even the best intended of us say, I'll take care of that later. And later potentially never comes.
We're not in a hurry when it comes to sending out the, I mean, we are planning to quite a long period for sending out the survey to different places. So I think it's a very good idea. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you again for coming and helping us. And enjoy the rest of the plenary.
So thank you so much. It's been great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Yes, thank you.